Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. A bit rainy, but not cats and dogs kind of weather today. I hope that everything, sorry, a bit issues with the sound, okay. I hope that everyone is doing well. And today we're going to have a webinar, how to navigate young learners' progress with gamified digital tools. And as you all know, students have their own habits when they come to the class. Some of them will come to you, they'll ask for your attention. Some of them will just sit and listen to you, and a couple of them will try to create chaos in it. And how to deal with that chaos, today we're going to talk about it. Basically, what we would like to introduce you, games, gaming with them. Showing them that throughout the games, you can encourage the motivation and learning. What is the most important for them? They are like small sponges. They observe, they gather all the information for you, what you say. And to work with that, we will talk about learning through the games. And just before, our lecturer, Margožata Moroš, who is more than 13 years in teaching of English language, practiced her skills not only as a teacher, but also as a teacher's mentor, and worked in Erasmus Plus program. I would like you to notice that training certificates will be sent to you in 2 weeks' time. To receive that, what you'll need to do is to click on the link in commentary section and fill in all the details. Also, in the same commentary section throughout the whole presentation, we'll encourage you to give us questions. We will answer them also at the end of it and throughout the whole presentation. So I hope that everyone is ready, and the word goes to our lecturer, Maggie.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. I want to make two comments. First of all, it is raining cats and dogs where I am, I'm currently in Germany, and the weather is just terrible. So I'm very happy to be spending this, afternoon already in this very nice, context with other teachers. It's definitely making my day much better. And the second thing is about chaos. I do like to embrace chaos sometimes. So I also encourage you to embrace it sometimes, because I think some things we can not change, but some things we can control a little bit better, and it makes our lives easier. And as a teacher, trainer, and as a mentor, I always do everything, and I focus on this thing a lot to make our lives easier as teachers, because I think we put so much effort and so much love and so much energy into what we do. We also deserve some tricks that should help us a little bit. So welcome everyone, and thank you very much for having me here. Before we kick off, just one request. Could you maybe please in the chat window write which city you're from? So let's see if the chat window works, and if everything goes fine, that's all right. If it doesn't work, I'm also prepared for that, so do not worry. But let's maybe give it a try. I'll write mine now, and you should already see it in the chat window. So maybe I could see some other cities. So let's see if it works. But all right, we've got Vilnius, yay. Okay, what else? Let's see. I hope you guys know how to open the chat window. There are these 3 dots you have to click. But also, if you struggle with it, do not worry. We'll manage without it too. And it's going to be fine. So let's wait for 10 more seconds. I'm sure there are people from many, many cities. Normally in online conferences, we gather together like from different parts of countries and the world. All right, so let's leave it for now, and let's kick off. So today we're going to talk about navigating young learners' progress with gamified digital tools. And I'd like to start with a short anecdote, which is this. And this is not me when I was a kid, but this represents me as a kid. I remember I was born in the 80s, and I remember when I was probably already in primary school, my father had this business computer. Now, it was this big computer with a keyboard that looked more like that, and it had these keys that would click when we pressed them. So when I was a kid, this was my favorite toy. Before I learned how to read and how to write, so it must have been like kindergarten, I would just spend, well, probably not that much time because my parents wouldn't let me, but I would click the buttons. And I don't remember it that well, but my mom told me that I would look at the letters and say, H looks like a ladder, and O looks like the sun, and so on and so forth. So it was my favorite pastime activity. But when my parents realized that I am just fascinated by this new device that we have at home, and, you know, like, again, it's the 80s, so, you know, it was not as advanced as it is now, they tried to get me some games. And there was one game that I just loved, and I believe it's a Polish game. It's called, which is where I come from, and it's called Ortotris. So it was like Tetris, but with spelling. So you had words falling down, and in each word there was a gap. Now, in my native language, in Polish, spelling is very tricky because we have combinations of letters that always sound the same, but you just spell words differently. And sometimes there are rules that you can just learn, but sometimes I don't think rules apply all the time, or maybe I just don't know. It's my native language, so I don't know it that well. But it was my favorite game. So you had to press the button and choose the correct letter. Now, when you choose the correct letter, the word disappears. But when you don't, the words pile up, and eventually you have, you know, less and less time. So it becomes more and more difficult. Also, the words drop faster and faster. And I would just spend hours playing this game. And I loved it. Because first of all, it was simply fun. It was, you know, like more and more challenging. As I said, the words dropping faster and faster, and more difficult words. And I was only a kid. So what I also liked about it was that I could show off during tests at school. Now, one of the most difficult words to spell in Polish is GEGUŽŽ. It's a terrible word. No one ever knows how to spell it. Like I had to, you know, double check because that was years ago. But back then I knew how to spell such words with no problem. Now, trust me, spelling in Polish schools in primary years, this is just a nightmare. Everyone hates it because it's just so very difficult. And another cool thing was that I could compete with my older brother. Now, my brother is 4 years older. So when I was in grade 1, he was in grade, 5, right? So, yeah, grade 5. So, but as a kid, I didn't really notice that he's, you know, already like he's got more knowledge, and, you know, he's older, because in this game, it didn't matter, because in this game, we just had to learn the spelling, and I could actually be as good as him. I could actually be better than him sometimes, not always, not very often, but it was possible. So we could challenge, but at the same time, we were learning. So there were many sort of fields in which this game was just great for me. Most of it was just fun. Let's be honest about that. But there was also this sort of side result of playing this game a lot. And the side result was that in my final certificate at school, in język polski, which is the Polish language, so it's like Polish literature and spelling and grammar, so our native language, I always got best grades. I was just very, very good at it because I knew it. I knew spelling, I had great grades, and it was my, you know, it was my favorite subject, not even English. You know, I didn't like English that much in primary school. So then as I grew up, there were also some other games that I started to play. Now, this time I only played them for fun. And one of these games was Jack-O-Lantern, where you play as a detective in the US in the 20s, I believe, and you have to solve a mystery. Now, of course, not everything was accessible in Poland, so the games that I had were in English, and I couldn't understand much, but I wanted to play the game. I had no choice, so I forced myself. And another game was called Team Hospital, and you were a director at a hospital, and you had to run the hospital, build it, manage patients, and so on. Quite an easy game. So recently, there is this platform where you can pay a little bit of money and you can play some old games. So I did that in my 30s, just to check because I wanted to play these old games, you know, a walk down memory lane. And I realized that there are some phrases in these games that I still remember by heart, and I remember the intonation, like everything, really. That was, mind you, 25 years ago? I still remember exactly that in Team Hospital, the nurse and no, the secretary who was announcing some things, she said, "To surgeons required in operating theatre." I do remember this melody, even though it's been 25 years, because it was drilled so well in my head. And this was never my intention, to learn these phrases at the age of 8 or 9. This just happened by the way. I wasn't learning with these games, in my opinion, back then. I was playing them to have fun, but I did learn a lot. That's how I learned the word operating theatre. And then when I had classes with surgeons, and I did have this episode in my life, I knew these words very well. And that's how I learned the word unfortunate. It's just an unfortunate coincidence again. You see, these are advanced words, but to me, these were just words that I needed to, you know, move to the next level of the game. Now, since then, a lot has changed. Because I do remember that to me, school and home, these were two totally different things. Now, home was playing games and playing with my brother, playing a lot of games in English, watching some, cartoons in English, because that's what we had. And school was where I took my books, I sat at the desk and I listened to the teacher. And basically I was very, obedient, and I was learning. Now, I did not notice that I was also learning at home. And if we have a look at the changes since the 80s or early 90s, basically years ago, our classrooms look slightly different. Because, this picture that you can see in the presentation, it's a bit of an exaggeration for the purpose of this presentation to show you how big the contrast is, but you know what I mean. We changed our classroom from rooms where you have tables and the blackboard and chalk, right, to digital classrooms, especially this year, right? The pandemic has forced us to, to open our digital classrooms to our students. And also there are more and more classrooms. I don't know about your classrooms, but I'm sure there are some classrooms where the tables are not arranged in lines, maybe in a circle, maybe U-shape, maybe L-shape, maybe there's a carpet in the middle where you can play with your students. So these things have changed because now we know more about how to teach, and there is more research that has been done, and we have much more knowledge. Now, another thing is that I remember that when I was in primary school, the teacher, I was kind of scared of my teachers. They were really nice people. They were great, fantastic people. They taught me a lot of things. But to me, I was a little bit scared. They were, the boss in the classroom. And I do believe that most of us, especially, I don't know about teachers of other subjects, but I do know a lot about teachers of foreign languages, of English. We like to think ourselves as partners. We support our students in this journey during which they learn a lot. We don't tell them we don't do this anymore most of the time, right? If you were lucky to have very nice students. But we try to support them. And if we have more difficult, challenging students that require a bit more support, we try to facilitate this process of learning. And also, when I was at school, I don't remember playing games that much. In breaks, yes, of course. We ran a lot, played tag and, hide and seek and everything. But in the classroom, we're mostly sitting, But now we also know that games are okay, that games are fun, but games can also have this very strong educational value. And I still sometimes struggle with some parents understanding. Sometimes parents would go and say, well, but my child, they say that you only play in your English lessons. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what we do, and we do it on purpose. So I want to give you some examples today, and I want to give you some theory. So next time you meet the parents who maybe have a bit of a problem with that, which is absolutely understandable, I'm not criticizing, you will have some arguments and some tools to explain how it works, but you also have some tools that you can take, use them on Monday, and just have great lessons without much effort, with short preparation time, and which are really effective. So, as I said, today we're going to talk about this mysterious word, which I got rid of all the vowels because I wanted to start with a bit of a game. This is something I also play with my students. I put words on the board, I erase vowels, and they have to guess. Very simple game. Students love it for some reason. It's fun, and it's mystery, and we like mysteries, don't we? So we're going to talk about this thing called gamification. But I believe that it's really important to start with establishing the term, because we might understand it in different ways. So let's just work on one definition of it so we all know what we're talking about. So what is this thing called gamification? I'm sure that all of you have heard this word before. It's kind of a big thing in our industry at the moment, and we do have a lot of game elements in our books. If you read teachers' books, you would also see a lot of games, and also with some extra materials. There are many talks about it. So the definition of gamification is in education, because we are talking about education, specifically about teaching English as a foreign language, is this approach that incorporates game design elements in educational environment. So we look at games, we look at how they're structured, and everyone loves games. So we want our students to love our lessons. So we take the best of both worlds, games and teaching, and we take elements of games into educational environment. And this is crucial, because it's not just taking games and playing them. It has to have this educational value, because that's, after all, our job. We're supposed to teach. And the very aim of using these methods that are related to gamification is to support learning in a variety of contexts and subject areas. So in our case, that would be teaching English. And taking these elements to support collaboration, so cooperation between us and students, and also students with one another. Self-guided study, because they do learn in our classroom, but we also want them to be able to learn on their own. If they are curious, they want to discover, they need some tools to do it. We want to make assessments easier and more effective, because we don't want to spend countless hours checking and correcting tests, and we have all been there. Maybe some of us are still there, and I feel you. I'm also there sometimes. We want it to be effective. We want also to give our students some tools that would help them get this immediate feedback. So they solve the test, they get the result instantly, immediately. And we also want to integrate some exploratory approaches to learning. We want our students to discover on their own, and it may be this guided discovery. So we'll guide them a little bit. They do need our support, but they can discover a lot of things on their own with our support, stronger or weaker, depending on the student. And we also, obviously, as always, want to strengthen their creativity and retention. We want them to keep revising things from the past. Remember, I told you about Jack Orlando, the game, and Theme Hospital, 25 years, I still remember, right? So there's a lot of retention. I'm so happy about it, really. It made my day. And these methods we use them in teaching languages, but not only, because we also use them in our everyday life. Nowadays, you'll find examples of gamification everywhere with some, for example, sport watches. I don't know if you use them. I do use a sport watch, and that's why I stay physically active in these difficult times in which we spend a lot of time sitting in front of our computers. Also, many apps that you use maybe for shopping. You go to the shop, you scan the code, you collect the points, and then if you collect 100 points, you can get a reward, maybe a discount, maybe a small present, like small gift, or maybe, I don't know, you can shop in different hours, or you get some, discount before everyone else. This is also gamification. It's a challenge, right? Your challenge is to collect points. Now, when it comes to games, there are a lot of aspects of them that I paid closer attention to while working on my methods of teaching, and also while preparing the session, because I want to give you a little bit, not too much, but a little bit of theory. Games guide players through the mastery process and keep them engaged with potentially difficult tasks. As you know, we start with level 1, but then the games are getting more and more difficult. And still, how many of you, and I'm sure everyone, if I could see your hands, I'm sure everyone would raise a hand. How many of you never gave up in one game? There was just one game that was a little bit frustrating sometimes. It was really difficult, getting more and more difficult, but still you wouldn't give up. You were engaged even though the tasks were getting more and more difficult. Now, another thing is that as tasks get more difficult, we improve our skill level. So it's not like the first level is going to be the most difficult one. We start off keen, we start off easily, and then with something easy, and then the tasks get more and more difficult. They're tailored to our skill level. So we get some skills in level 1, we get more skills in level 2. In level 3, we have to combine all of these together. And that's exactly what happens with learning. We start with words, we start with sounds. Eventually, we end up making complex sentences. So that's just the same thing, really. And also, the goals that we face in games are very specific, right? In games, you have to build a hospital and manage it for 1 month without losing any patience. And I don't know, or you're racing and you have to make 10 loops, right? And then you win the race, or you're a runner-up, or whoever. And these moderately difficult, but very immediate goals are motivating for our learners. Now, we're going to talk about these immediate goals a little bit later because there is a big discussion about it. But before we do, I want to show you some more practical ideas using these things, based on these things that I have just told you. And to do that, I'm going to use an example from the platform called Navio. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Navio. If not, it's okay. Don't worry, you'll catch up. Everything will be clear. But basically, Navio is a digital platform that comes with gamified course. So it's the content from the book, but gamified online. So many teachers use it in online lessons, but of course, it's not the only way to use it. I'm going to talk about it in a moment. Now, in Navio, when you log in, you have a lot of resources. What we're going to focus on today is the so-called tap and teach lessons. Now, this is a digital platform that you need a computer for, and we all work on our computers nowadays because, of course, the pandemic, right? Online lessons or hybrid, blended, depending on your school, probably in the region, maybe. But these tap and teach lessons, this is basically our book, but online with some tools for drawing, for making shapes, you know, drag and drop, and a lot of things like that. You will see everything in a moment. And I have divided this part of the session into 6 parts. So each part is 1 level. We're going to go through levels from 1 to 6. And for each level, we're going to discuss one aspect, either vocab or grammar or reading. So you'll have 6 examples in total. Some examples would have variations. So hopefully by the end of this session, you will have collected many ideas. And I really encourage you to make notes and to use them on Monday. There's no time to waste. Do not postpone it. Just, you know, take it and use it and make your life easier starting in 3 days. So we're going to start with level 1, and we're going to focus on vocab because in the very first years of education, this is our main focus. Of course, we do put a lot of attention to communication, and that's what we need this vocab for. But there's a lot of work. There are many words that our students have to master at the age of 6 or 7, and then getting a little bit older. And the lesson I chose, and it's as an example, is the lesson about food. It's called Fantastic Food. And as you can see here, we've got 2 pages. We've got 1 page, really. The one on the left, we're going to focus on vocab. We're leaving grammar for later. That would be too much for 1 lesson. But on both pages, the bottom of these pages, you can see the words that our students have to learn. So we've got eggs, meat, fish, chips, rice, fruit, cake, salad, chicken, ice cream. Quite a lot of words for very small kids, but I assure you they can master it. And also the first thing I always do before teaching a lesson is I check what I have. So I already know that I have this page, right, in my book, but and also there is a big picture and like there's a lot of things we can do with it, but also there is the workbook. So I also know that I have some extra exercises. Everything is also available online. So I know that I can teach it in my classroom lesson, but also in my online classroom, online lesson, not necessarily face-to-face. And I start with setting goals for my lesson. Now, normally in this program that I'm also talking about here, Navio, what you have, is you have lesson aims, and you uncover them. Now, you do not have to uncover all of them, because if you think that for you students, identifying and naming food items, singing a song, doing a matching activity, and saying the vocabulary chant is a little bit too much for 1 lesson, it's perfectly fine. You just don't uncover everything. You just pick whatever, whatever suits your aims for this particular lesson. Now, when I ask the question, how do you usually introduce new words in your lessons? Most of the time, the first answer that I get from many teachers is by using flashcards. And that's great. And that's also my answer, to be honest. Flashcards are everything, aren't they? And we all use them, and they're just a fantastic tool that can help us teach some words. Now, in Navio, you also have flashcards. You have a set of all flashcards for each lesson, for each unit, but they are digital, which is kind of cool because it's very easy to use them online. And also you can easily adjust them to whatever you need for this lesson. So this is a set of flashcards. We have all the words from this lesson, the words that I have shown you before. So as you can see, we've got 10 words here. That's quite a lot. And we can do whatever you normally do in your face-to-face lesson. You can just, cover, uncover, hide, and so on. You can do all the games with flashcards. Now, what I do using this tool, using digital tools, is I try to boost these activities a little bit. And I do it by various methods. The first thing, the simplest thing I do, which is not time consuming at all, is I simply assign points depending on how difficult guessing the word would be. So as you can see, I assign 1 point if my student can see the picture and hear the word, because it's relatively easy. They see it, they hear it. So if they choose this flashcard, because I asked them to say the words, right? If they choose this flashcard, they get 1 point. Now, I assign 2 points if my student decides to hear the word without seeing it and then guessing the word. Because it's a little bit more difficult, there is no visual here. So you can see the challenge is already a little bit higher. Now, because we're talking about the first grade, sometimes this is the moment when our students are learning to read and they can't read yet. Sometimes they can already read also throughout the year, towards the end of the year, they're becoming better and better at it. Because sometimes they do learn in kindergarten, sometimes their parents teach them to read, sometimes they don't, right? So it really depends on the system and also the region and sometimes also the circumstances. So I give 3 points if my student can read the word. I wouldn't always use it. Now you have to decide because you know your classes best. So I decide if my students can already read letters, maybe they're not very good at it, but they can recognize letters, I would do it. But if only some of my students can read, I wouldn't do it because I don't want anyone to feel left out, or I would put them in groups in which at least one child can read. And then they get 3 points. So they choose the flashcard and then, for example, they choose, I don't know, let's say they choose the one which is in the bottom right corner and they say milkshake and they get a point, right? 1 point. But if they choose the one in the bottom left corner, they say fruit, they read the word, they get 3 points. And then they collect points and we can get the winner. Now, sometimes I would let my students compete against each other. Sometimes I would make them compete against me. It depends on how competitive they are and how they react to competition. So, because again, I don't want them to feel stressed. I want my classroom to be this safe space for them. Now, this is one thing I do. And as you can see, the only thing you do is assign points. There's no work on your side, really. But this game, my students love it because it's competition. So especially when they compete against me, they love it the most. But sometimes also use other tools. Now in this digital tool in Navio, you also have markers and highlighters of different colors. So what I do sometimes is I use colors and I do basically the same thing, but instead of assigning points, I color code. And then my students can choose a flashcard. And now they will get more points if they, for example, for the word fish, they will get 3 points, right? For the yellow one, or maybe they will get 4 points here for the yellow one. But then if they choose, for example, the red one, so they can just name, it's easier online because they can just say the color. If they choose the red one, then they get 3 points. And if they choose the blue one, so you can see that they can hear, there's this play sound, they can play the sound, they can hear the word, they can see a little bit of it. But as you can see, I'm not very helpful here. Like you almost can't see the picture. So they get 2 points. And then eventually, if they choose the black one, they can see the picture, they can hear the word, they get 1 point. So what your students do is they can decide how well they know, how confident they feel. right? Also, you don't have to assign points here. You can just ask them to choose colors. So then if you have weaker students, they do not feel left out because they can choose easier versions and it's still fun. So points are just an option, but you have to decide if it's good for your students, if they're not too competitive, because then it may actually turn out otherwise. And instead of fun, we have a lot of drama and chaos. And we like to embrace chaos, but we don't want it too often, right? And also, if you have more advanced groups, or if your students already know this game very well, you can boost it a little bit, and you can first color code the flashcards, as I did in the previous exercise, and then you can just cover them. So the students only decide on the level of difficulty here. But they still don't know if they would guess the word or not. They have no, as you can see on the left side, if they know the word eggs, they're likely to choose eggs because they already know the word. Here, they don't know what's in the upper left corner. So it's, it's a little bit more difficult. So this is what I do as a revision, for example. When they already know the word, they probably remember what is where and, but it doesn't matter really, right? So it becomes a little bit more difficult. So as you can see, we're just, expanding the difficulty level. And that's exactly what I have mentioned before, because in gamified tasks, I would say, or lessons, challenges are perfectly tailored to our player's skill level. So at the very beginning of the school year, I'm going to make it easy, but towards the end of the school year, my students already know these words. It's a revision lesson or global revision. They already have more skills, so I can make the tasks a little bit more difficult to adjust them to their skill level, right? So I think we can give each other a digital high five because it all goes in line with the theory. So we've done a good job. And now we can move on to another example. And this time it's going to be level 2. And we're going to focus on vocab again. I promise we're going to jump to grammar and reading in a moment, but let's stay with vocab for a while. And this time it's level 2. My students can already read, well, slowly, but it's still a lot, right? It's still a lot. So I'm trying currently to learn German. And even though I know all the letters, they use Latin letters, I'm just so confused sometimes. There's simple rules. I still don't know how to read some things. Now in English, as you know, when it comes to reading, you never know. You have to learn the words because there are no rules really, because there are words that come from Latin, Greek, German, big mixture. You never know. So, but they can already recognize letters and they can already put them together, right? They can read. And the topic I've chosen here is all year round. So this is grade 2, level 2, just to remind you. And this time my students are going to learn some activities like smell flowers, plant seeds, finish school, go to the beach, and eat chestnuts and celebrate Halloween, wear warm clothes and open presents. But also there is another words here, which would be the names of seasons. And as you can see in the workbook where we have exercises connected with this lesson, we also have summer, spring, winter, and autumn, right? So there's quite a lot of vocab again. And again, we are moving from the word level to the collocation level, right? So we already have 2 words here. It's already more challenging because our students have already gained some skills, have already developed some skills. So there's no reason to make it too easy for them. Because also, as I keep telling my students, also adult students, easy is boring. We don't want them to get bored. We want them to be moderately challenged, right? Not too challenged so they don't get discouraged, but we don't want to make it too easy because, it's just like when you play very easy card games when you're a kid, and at some point, if you still like playing cards, you probably choose more difficult games. All right. So our lesson aims, and here, as you can see, I haven't uncovered all of them because I'm not going to do everything because my lesson is a little bit too short for that. I think it might be a little bit challenging, so I need more time for that. So my students are going to identify and name seasonal activities. They already know the names of seasons, but we'll have to revise it, right? Because they might have forgotten a little bit, right? And they're going to do a matching activity. And maybe if we have enough time, say the vocab chant, maybe. We'll see about that. So the first thing I do is after we have discussed this vocab, we've used flashcards, I check what the tools themselves offer me. Because very often digital tools are already they already are games. So I don't want to do the same job twice because there are some much wiser people who have already prepared a lot of things. And if you work with quality books, with quality materials, I'm sure there are many, many tools that are ready-made. And the only thing you do is you open your laptop and you turn your computer on and you just put it on the screen. So I have this task here that has already been prepared by the book authors, and it's a typical drag and drop activity. So you have pictures, you have to read the seasonal activities, and you have to put pictures in the correct place. So this is the first step. Relatively easy, especially because even if my students forgot the word smell, they can see flowers, you know, and they can see, for example, a school corridor. So, you know, so it's kind of like there's a lot of support for them here. But I think smelling flowers and planting seeds, this is something that might be challenging, because I believe that most of our students go to the beach or have been to the beach once, maybe, like if not by the sea, then by the river, and they all finish school, hopefully every year, right? If they don't have this experience, because no, it's the second grade, so they all have finished school at least once in their life, right? Hopefully once. But planting seeds, I don't remember planting seeds when I was a kid. It's something that we don't do very often. It's not a typical activity, or maybe it is for some, but not for all of them. And also smelling flowers, I kind of did that, but it's not something I would think about. So this is quite challenging. So I want to spend a little bit more time on this activity. And I also want to make it a little bit more challenging, because I think drag and drop is a good first step, but my students need to be challenged more. So how can we make it more challenging? Well, it's very easy. As I said, I do believe in work-life balance, and I do think that we as teachers put a lot of energy, a lot of effort in preparing our lessons. Therefore, it's very important for me to offer some exercises and activities that shorten the preparation time, because I think that it's long enough anyway, and we very often spend our private time preparing things. That's why I like to work with good materials, because then I do not have to spend my private time on doing things for work. Therefore, I'm staying sane, right? And I have for the last 10 plus years, right? So the only thing I do to turn it into a bit more challenging game is I add the timer, which I have in the tool. So, but also you can just find some free online timers, or you can use, I don't have my phone at hand, but you can use your phone, show it to the camera, or share your screen. So I just use a timer. Now, remember I told you about this game Orthotrees, where it is the spelling game at the very beginning? So it was getting much more exciting when the words were dropping faster, because I was like, I have to speed up, I have to speed up. And this is when we get excited, right? So it's enough to just set the timer for 10 seconds. And then suddenly your kids, your students, they get more excited, and that's just it. And it's a part of a typical every typical game would have some sort of a timer, right? Maybe not strategy games. I'm not very good with these, but these, games in which you have to click fast, there's always some time limit. But it's possible to make it even more challenging, because at some point there will be the revision lesson, and I want to use the same activity because it's a good one. I want to exploit it. So to make it even more challenging, not only do I set the timer, which is again optional, you can, but you don't have to do it, but I also turn this activity into dialogues. So here, as you can see, we have these activities: smell flowers, plant seeds, finish school, go to the beach. But as you remember, there were also seasons there, and we will have to match them with seasons. So what I do is I have short dialogues. I say, as a teacher, I say the season, for example, spring. And only then my students have to choose the right activity, and then they pick the picture and they say it out loud. So they would say plant seeds, and then they can, drop it to the right place. So here I'm making it more challenging, because if my students know 3 out of 4 activities, they're going to just do these 3 and leave the last one because it's the last one left, so it has to be correct. And I want to make sure that they learn all the phrases. I mean, it's only natural to start with those that are the easiest. Now here, with these dialogues, I am in charge. I am in control of what they pick. Therefore, if I see that planting seeds is very challenging for them to remember, because they cannot maybe fully refer to that, I can focus on this. I can make it the first one, which makes it more challenging for them. And they have to first find the difficult were. Now I'm using quotation marks because, you know, like sometimes it wouldn't be difficult for kids, but for some might be. We also, you know, have mixed ability classes, right, with different levels. So some kids would have extra English lessons, some don't. So, you know, like there's a lot of adjusting here. But with these tools, not much work on your side. And as I said, timer is just an option. I do like to use it. So it's like super challenging, but probably not at the very beginning. You know your students best, so you know when to implement it. And if we get back to this theory that we have mentioned at the beginning, specific, moderately difficult, immediate goals are motivating for learners. Now here, that's exactly what we're doing. Very specific, very immediate goals. Right? We are not thinking about something we're going to do in 10 lessons, right? We're thinking about here and now, and that's it. So again, we deserve a digital high five, which I'm giving you. I've become a master of digital high fives with my online students, you know, also a digital turtle, we call it in Polish, and like all the combinations, almost like being a cheerleader really sometimes, but I'm enjoying this. But anyway, we're talking about online lessons a lot, but hopefully we can see this light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train, it's the end of the pandemic. I don't know when it's going to come, but it's sort of like, it's not as vague as it used to be, as it was a year ago. So sooner or later, we will get back to physical classrooms, hopefully sooner than later. So what if you teach face-to-face rather than online? Because I'm using online tools here, right? Digital online tools. And the answer is very easy. First of all, sometimes at schools you have interactive whiteboards. What you do is you launch the program, you put it on the screen, use your interactive whiteboard, and it's great. You can drag and drop on the board and so on. But not all the classrooms would have IWBs. Some classrooms do not have. I also worked in classrooms where we still had not even a whiteboard with colorful markers, but the blackboard with chalk. And there are many people who work like that, and I also worked like that not that long ago. But what you can do is you can use a school computer, and you can just put it on the screen and ask the students to sit around it. And even if you have a lot of students and the screen is quite small, you can still do it. You can divide them in groups. Maybe you're lucky to have a computer room. Feel free to do it. So remember that it's great. I mean, it's great to do it online, but you can also do it in a physical classroom. In some lessons, I used some Macmillan tools on my phone, actually, because my computer broke down and I had no plan B. So I just played some songs on the phone and so on. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, but I pulled it off, right? And if you're prepared for that, then it's even easier. All right, so let's move on to level 3. And this time we're opening the box of grammar, the scary, scary topic that we're all scared of. Honestly, my favorite. I am a big fan of grammar. That's why I like German so much, because everything is logical. So I hate the pronunciation because it's difficult, but grammar is just delicious. Now with English grammar, I think teachers know it's great, but students tend to disagree, right? So let's try to change their mind, and let's try to encourage them to embrace it by implementing some game design tools, some game design elements into grammatical tasks. So level 3, and I have chosen this topic in which you have present continuous. Sorry, not present continuous, sorry, I'm going to, be going to, so future, right? So we have this, as you can see, this green box, you can see it on the left side with the subject, and you have all sounds like I, he, she, it, also, we, you, they. Then we have the auxiliary verb, right? So to be, right, in different forms, going to, and then we have different activities, and we also have the time expressions. So next week, tomorrow, after school, and so on, so forth. And we also have workbook as always. So when I plan my lessons, I can already see that if I need more practice here, I can use my workbook for that, or assign it as a homework task. So we'll see. Now, this lesson, I believe it's quite challenging because the structure is quite complex. We're talking about third graders. So I'm not going to do everything. I'm just going to do identifying the parts of a sentence in the grammar table. Theory is already meta level of grammar, right? It's not only drilling structures, but it's also understanding how they work. Now, to us, it seems obvious, but to third graders, not so much, because until this moment, what they were learning were ready-made phrases, right? I like ice cream. I like bananas, right? They didn't think it's like a subject plus like plus object, right? So this is when it starts. And they're going to talk and write about future plans. Now, as you can see, in this program that I'm using for that, but you can also just read it out. Listen and follow, repeat. This is the task. And if you play the recording, you can maybe see that at the bottom of it, you've got this blue button with the white arrow, and this is where you can play the recording. And the reader would read a couple of sentences out loud. They would go, I am going to play football on Tuesday. And then the students can repeat. She isn't going to go swimming tomorrow. Or they are going to go surfing after school. So you see, like, I can just pick some examples. Now you have to be very careful here. So you have to make sure that the students understand that the first 3 columns, they have to go in line. So I goes with am, he, she goes with isn't, and so on and so forth. But then when it comes to play football, go swimming, and so on, and when it goes to time words, you can mix and match. It doesn't matter. To make it a little bit easier for them, and to make, because it's already a lot of theory here, right? 3rd graders, again, how old are they, right? What I do is my favorite thing in the world. I do it in a physical classroom. I do it in my digital online classroom. I color code. I color code everything. I like literally color code my life. So I also color code my lessons. So normally throughout the year, I'm trying to always use the same color for the same part of a sentence. So my subject would always be yellow. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I forget, but it's good to have like a cheat sheet somewhere at hand just to remember. So subject is yellow. Then I have auxiliary verb, which is either green if it's positive, affirmative, or red if it's negative. Then going to, which is my grammatical word here, which is black. And then the blue color goes for activities, already collocations here, and the white color goes for time expressions. And what I do is I use the tools in Navio, but again, you can also do it on a board. You can do it in, I don't know, Microsoft Paint or whatever you use. I use it. And because it's ready-made, it's very efficient sort of time-wise, you know, so I don't spend much time on that, because what I do in Navi is just like I have this activity in a book, and right next to it, I have some space. So this is where I put the doors. That's why I love this program so much, especially this year and in 2020. Just love, lifesaver for me. So what I do is I code some sentences simply by using colors. So we have, let's say, the first line, which is yellow, green, black, blue, white. So my students only see the colors and the board, the chart, the table, and they have to make their sentences. Now, this is already when they have to make decisions, because they have to match I with am and she with is or isn't, right? So I am going to play football next week. This is my first sentence, but there are also other options, because your students can also say, we are going to go surfing tomorrow. Now, in the first line, I'm talking about the first line here, right? They cannot say, I am not going to go surfing next week, because there's a green dot, not the red one. If they want to make a negative sentence, they have to wait until the second turn, which is the second line, right? So in the second line, you see, instead of a green dot, we have the red dot. So it's going to be a negative sentence. So you see, they use this table to make their own sentences. They're already creative here. They can already make their own sentences with a lot of support. But what we do here is, instead of telling them, okay, so this is the subject, and you've got this auxiliary verb and so on, this is difficult, right? We say, these are colors. That's how it works. Just like in this game, Mastermind. I don't know if you know this game, but it's basically the same thing, really. So a lot of inspiration from childhood in this session. But as you can see, there's also the last line here. Now, this is the interesting line, because as you can see, I moved the time word to the very beginning of the sentence, because I can do it. So my students, again, have to look at the colors and try to make the sentence a sentence using the last line, the pattern in the last line. So starting with white. And what we end up with is, next week, she is going to go water skiing, right? So look, they move the time expression because it's possible. They cannot move the auxiliary verb. They cannot switch the place of a subject and an object, subject and an object, or like subject and the verb here, because we're not talking questions here, right? So, but they can already discover, even though it's not written in the book, they can discover that the time word can be moved. And again, mixed and matched. So I do not finish with this. I take the next task, which is dialogues, because I want to my students to talk about their plans for the future. Remember, this was one of my lesson aims. And I would take these sentences and simply cover some words with colors. And then my students, instead of reading out dialogues, which could be the first step, in the second step, they have to recall these words. They have to recall the pattern, and they have to put whatever suits here, wherever fits here. So green, that was our auxiliary verb. And then we have black, that was going to. And then we have blue and football. What was it that went with football? Do I eat football? I mean, of course, some students would say eat football and laugh, and that's okay. But we play football, right? And then there was this time expression, school. Was it at school? No, but at school is sort of like a place, right? It was about the times after school, before school. They can say before school. Fair enough. It works, right? So you can make these dialogues a little bit more creative, I'd say. And as you remember, one of the aspects of games that we like to use in education is integrating exploratory approaches to learning. Instead of just taking what we have and following the pattern, we can make it, more creative. We can help our students explore new rules. For example, that you can take the time expression and put it at the beginning. Instead of just telling them, you can say after school at the beginning of the sentence, you can just show them the colors, let them explore, let them guess it on their own, because that's when it's like eliciting rather than giving. It stays longer in their heads. Okay, so we have already seen how to keep students engaged and how to facilitate learning. And we were talking about this sort of short-term motivation, right? We want them to have fun in our lessons. So what about long-term motivation? Because after all, we don't only want them to, stay motivated for one lesson. We want them to stay motivated throughout the whole year. And as you know, sometimes, especially around May, it's getting more and more difficult, right? So it's like now it's getting difficult. The weather is getting better, not here, but in some places. And, the students want to go out and they don't really want to spend that much time in front of the computer or at school. So when it comes to long-term motivation, games can also help us. Because at school, our students are normally told what to do, and they don't really understand these long-term benefits of their work. We don't tell them, you have to learn how to name colors because maybe when you're 18, you want to pass CAE, right? Because honestly, they couldn't care less, right? They're not interested in that. They're too young for that. And gamification can help students ask, if I want to master school, just like I want to master my favorite game, what do I do next? So rather than saying, the final outcome of the game we're playing here at school, which is learning the language, is you having a C1 level certificate, we just take it step by step. What do I do next? I have mastered this. What's next? Therefore, they don't get frustrated like adults sometimes do when they go, I want to learn German in a year, and then a year has passed and you still don't know and you're frustrated. We can avoid it easily. Just like with a game, you don't think about the last level of the game. You're here and now and you're excited about that. So you get very clear, actionable tasks and promises and the promise of immediate rewards. You mastered this, you go to the next level. Rather than saying you mastered this and one day in the future you will get something out of it. You can put it on your CV. Really, third graders, they do not know what the CV is, I think. I surely didn't know. So a tool that helps me a lot when it comes to motivating my students long-term by giving them short tasks is this part of Navio, which is like a platform game. And I don't know, for those of you who already use Navio, are familiar with that, let me just show you briefly how it works. And I really encourage you to explore it because it's just fantastic. You can assign things for students to do at home. It's a game in which you choose your character, you design your character, and you move from the one place to another. You move around different islands or planets or whatever you call it, and you have some tasks. So to move to another level, and it's called levels really, to move to another level you have to solve some tasks. And as you might have guessed, the tasks are, as you can see, related to our lessons. So in our lessons we learn how to name food, and then the task to go to the next level would be to drag and drop some pictures to label foods, or to write some sentences. And our students will get immediate rewards. Now, these will be symbolic rewards. And don't get me wrong, I do not say that we should always focus on these immediate rewards, that we always have to give something in exchange for their work. I think sometimes praising is enough. And I think we can't go too crazy with that, because our students, they should eventually learn to learn for learning's sake. It's a terrible sentence, right? They should want to learn, because they should see the long-term benefits. But I do not expect it of my very young learners, because I think a very young learner is like, they want a candy now. An older learner might think, well, in the future, I would like to study architecture, therefore I need the language because I would like to study it in London, right? So they get these rewards, but they're symbolic. They're not objects, they're stickers, and there's praising and being awesome. They have to solve gamified tasks. As you can see, there's also the timer. I, as a teacher, decide what they do. I assign tasks, but they can also do some extra tasks at home. If they're ambitious, they can replay it over and over again, just like I did with, orthotries and spelling. And again, sometimes they would have to, say which picture. So they hear the name, they have to pick the right picture. Sometimes they would have to fill the gaps with words when it's grammar. So, and also if they fail, what they do get is, instead of saying like, yeah, you failed, but you're still awesome, they go, keep trying. It's okay. You failed. Just keep trying. Just keep trying winning the race in a game in which you race, you're a racing car in the desert or something. So I do encourage you to explore this tool, because this is something that can help you motivate your students long term. So you don't have to design this year-long game. It's already been done for you. Now, I need a break for a sip of water. And let me move on to level 4. And this time we're going to focus on reading. And I have chosen something. I hope you've already had dinner or you're not very hungry, because we're going to talk about something that looks delicious. It's Knickerbocker Glory. I love and hate this lesson at the same time, because I'm trying to stay away from such things. But then again, so we're going to talk about that. I have a recipe here, and my students will have to read the recipe, read the ingredients, equipment, follow the steps, so, typical recipe text. And I also have some tasks in my workbook in which I have to put the recipe parts in order. So there's a lot of understanding here, reading for detail. And again, I have my lesson aims all done here. Now, I don't know about your students, but my students normally, when exposed to reading tasks, their response is rather unenthusiastic. They look like this owl going like, no, let's not read, which I understand. Because, reading, like, I have to stay focused. And I believe it's more and more difficult to stay focused nowadays with so many distractions and so on. I do my best to change it, because I'm a big fan of reading. And I do believe in the importance and the power of reading. So the way I do it is, I take Navio again. And I have the first task in my Navio. Look at the photo from the recipe. What ingredients do you think you need to make a Knickerbocker Glory? Make a list. And now here I can divide my students into groups, or they can work individually. Depends on their level, depends on how they cooperate with each other. So the decision is yours here, really, because you know your students. And then they make a list of ingredients. Sometimes I would also ask them to make a list of ingredients and also a list of equipment that we might need. So we need a glass, a spoon, probably something else too. And then I uncover the next page partly. I don't show them the recipe yet, but they can see the list of ingredients. They can see the list of equipment, and then they can compare. And for each thing they have guessed, they get a point. Or not, or they get a high five. It doesn't always have to be about points. So again, you can have two groups that can compete, or you can have them competing against you. It works for me very often with small groups. With bigger groups, I usually divide my class. Again, points optional. And then there is another thing I do. So the next step. So we have already established the list, the correct list of ingredients and equipment. And then we have the instructions. I cover the words using the tools in Navio. So I just, cover them with a marker, and then they have to put these words in the correct place. Now, this requires a lot of concentration, because can you break cream? Well, you can't break cream, but you can break biscuits into pieces, right? So they have to look around the text, right? There's a lot of language being learned and being taught here. But sometimes what I do is I get back to this original exercise in which they have to make a list. And then what I show them is the final version. They don't see the correct list of ingredients and equipment, and they see instructions with all the ingredients and equipment hidden. And then they have to take their own lists and check if they can still fill the gaps. So that's how they get immediate feedback on their work, because if they guessed correctly, they should have no problem with that. They hardly ever do. So next time we do a similar activity, because I do it with a lot of readings. Next time, what they do is they make very long lists, right? Just to be on the safe side, which is great because there's a lot of retention going on here, right? And there's a lot of revision going on. And then, of course, we can uncover the original list. So it's entirely like you can play with this exercise and you can do really whatever you want with it, depending on how much you want to challenge your students, because you need to tailor the difficulty level to their needs and also to their skill level. And of course, this is like we're talking about grade 4 here, but you can use it with other grades too. Like this can work for grade 5, 6, or probably even 3, right? And then there is another task here, which is find one mistake in each line of the recipe. And my students, they have to find mistakes, which is great because what I tell them usually is like, you know what, I made some mistakes here. I'm sure you can't find them. And then they go like, oh, we can. And I'm like, no, there's no way, guys. Sorry, there's no way. I'm too smart for that. They go like, no, we can. And they're already very excited about that. So this is the game aspect. They compete with me. And they can challenge me. They can also challenge one another. Of course, you can do it in groups. And it's very important because games usually invoke a range of powerful emotions. There's curiosity, there's frustration, there is joy, right? And they provide a very positive emotional experiences, such as optimism and pride, but they also provide some very negative emotional experiences, which is failure. But this is a part of learning a language too. And if you do it via games, using these gamified tools, they should help the players persist through these negative emotions and transform them into positive ones. So we had this task in which my students were supposed to find mistakes. What if they marked another word which was correct as a mistake? Well, what I do is I say, okay, so now I would like you to prepare sentences with mistakes. If they had made a mistake before, they already have a solution to the new task. They turn something negative and frustrating, which is I failed at the task, into something positive. I failed, but at the same time, I managed to do another task for my teacher. This is transforming negative into positive. This is how we support them in this transition, right? Extremely useful in classroom, extremely useful. So a digital high five, right? And we're going to jump on to level 5 and we're going to do grammar again. I just want to make sure, is it like because as far as I know, we have the room booked for a little bit longer, right? So is it okay if we continue for like 10 more minutes with a presentation? Do we have time for that? Or 5 minutes? Oh, sorry, I don't hear you. Yeah, okay, cool. So in case we're running out of time, please just, okay, let me know. So I'm going to speed up. But there's not much left, but it's really interesting what's left. So bear with me. Level 5. Now, I have chosen grammar this time, and I have chosen to and not enough. All right, so this is our target language for this lesson. You can see it on the left side in the slide, and then on the right side, you can also see that there are some more exercises, also some, pronunciation tasks, but we're not focused on pronunciation this time. We're focused on grammar, right? Pronunciation, that will be the next lesson. So these are my aims. We're going to act out some dialogues in pairs. We're going to use to and not enough with adjectives. My students already, this is grade 5, they already know a lot of adjectives. They already know some longer adjectives, right? Some extreme adjectives even, right? And we're going to play a memory game if we have enough time. I'll try my best in this lesson, but I don't know. Well, again, like plans, like expectations versus reality, but I usually show it to my students, right? So the first thing I do is I go one lesson back. Now, before this grammar lesson, there was a reading lesson, the same unit, the same context. And in the reading text that we discussed prior to the grammar lesson, the students are already exposed to target grammar. And this always happens in good courses. In good books, you always first expose your students to the target grammar. So they don't realize yet, but they already see some structures, and then we discuss them, right? Not the other way around, right? So they already have some, it kind of rings a bell. I've seen it before. So the first thing I do is I cover it. I say, okay, there are some words hidden here. Let's try to guess the words. And because they're already familiar with the text, they might remember them. We might have mentioned them before, and they might have memorized them or already understood, or maybe some of them just know them. So that's the first task. So there's a nice link between the previous and the current lesson. And then what I do is the same thing I did with words. I color code. Sorry, with grammar before. I color code. So I have a sentence. Heavy and the box. This is what my students have to do. So they have to look at the adjective given here, and they have to, hang a sec, yeah, and they have to make a sentence. So heavy and the box, they have to make the sentence either the box is too heavy or the box is too, I don't know, not heavy enough, but that doesn't make much sense, right? So the box is too heavy. To support my students, before, like here you can see the answer written, but before they write the answer, I color code it. So again, subject is yellow, the box, then I have my auxiliary verb, I mean, my verb in the sentence, which is to be, so is, and then too heavy, so too is green because it's positive, and an adjective would be blue, right? And then I code the negative sentence. I want to say the box isn't light enough. So the box, yellow subject, isn't, so verb with not. Then we have the adjective, light, and then we have the second part of the negative verb phrase, enough. And my student wrote the box isn't too heavy. Then I can say, look, but too is green. There is no green here. Come on, try again, you know? So again, that's how I guide them, right? By just giving them, by just color coding and supporting them. Or what you can do is you can ask your students to write the answers and then color code them. Why not, right? They like coloring and they have fun, and then they can also prepare some codes for their peers so they can challenge one another, and they're really good at it, especially grade 5. They're already quite big kids, so you know, they're like, some of them much more fluent when it comes to technology than I am. So honestly, they can deal with that. And then we can also do the same thing in other exercises. So this is this exercise where you click on the arrow and then you have the list of, so it's like multiple choice. I turn multiple choice into something a little bit more difficult. I turn it into color coding. Or I ask my students to color code first, and then we click on the arrow, we see the answers, and we check if any answer fits their color code. Again, if you have pictures to describe, like you can see on the right side, instead of writing sentences, ask your students, one student color codes, the other student reads the sentence. There you go, right? So, of course, at some point I want them to write, but I want them to play the game here too. And color coding is coding. It's playing a game. And then what I also do, because I want a lot of retention in my classroom. I want a lot of revisions. I want this language to be there, like language from 10 weeks ago. I want it to be present in my current classroom, in my current lesson. So we have this exercise in which we have to put the words in a correct order to create some sentences. I don't show all the options. I just show the words without the subject. And we have isn't too comfortable, is uncomfortable, and enough. So, you know, like it's not put in a correct order, but we're going to be talking about things that are comfortable or uncomfortable. Now, the context of this lesson was clothes. And I go, okay, I wonder how long a list you can make of things that can be comfortable or uncomfortable. And of course, naturally, my students would start with clothes. This is the, you know, we revise it in the previous lesson. This is a vocab we've learned, but I encourage them to also think outside the box. Okay, what if we're not talking about clothes? What else can be comfortable and uncomfortable? And then they go, oh, a sofa, a car, right? Or I don't know, an armchair. Because furniture, right, or also means of transportation. Bike can be very comfortable. My bike is very uncomfortable. So you see, so there's a lot of revision going on here, and then they can make new sentences that are outside the context of our lesson, but they're based on what they have learned before. So they understand that using to and not enough is not only about clothes, but also other things. And they can apply this grammar from this lesson to other aspects of their life. And that's exactly what we want, right? So theory moment, strengthening students' creativity and retention. That's why we do it. We want them to use words they have learned before. So a digital high five. And we're moving on to the last activity. So we've done 2 times vocab, 2 times grammar. We've done 1 reading activity. So let's do another reading activity because it's difficult to encourage our students to read. So we have to put a lot of effort into that. So let me give you another idea. Again, these ideas are very simple. Maybe some of them you've used already. Maybe some of them are new to you. I encourage you to use them because, again, there's no preparation time really. You just do it on the spot, right? And you just without, they're not time consuming. And you can turn everything together. You take 1 exercise in Navio, you turn it into 10 other exercises, and your students keep being engaged. So the text I've chosen is about time capsule and, you know, these things that people bury. There's also this geocaching thing, people hiding boxes around cities. I'm a big fan of it. So students are also familiar with it very often, you know, so they like this topic a lot. And my students are going to read the text and try to predict the content, like grade 6. So things are getting serious. So I start with this. I'd like you to have a look at the questions that we have here. Now, these questions are not in the text. I made them, I prepared them, I've chosen them. And I only show my students, like the black thing, as you can see, it's a tool in Navio. So we can hide some things or like, you know, by putting shapes or reversed shapes, right? So I just take a fragment from it, I cover the text and I ask questions. Okay, so this person who's the owner of these objects, is it a girl or a boy? And that, of course, it can be both. So normally girls say a girl and boys say a boy, but like it doesn't really matter because it's just to keep them interested. How old are they, right? And some students would say, oh, 1980, so they must be very, very old. So I go, how old were they back then? You know, like there's a lot of questions you can ask here. Where did they bury the capsule? We don't know it, but here you can elicit a lot of nice vocab. In the garden, at school, in the forest, right? When was it buried? So you have numbers here. We have time expressions. Yesterday, I don't know, last week. What are their hobbies? So here they have to look at the objects. What's their new favorite game? There's Rubik's Cube, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it's football because there are also some cards with footballers, right? We don't know that. And normally when my students give answers, I go, well, you know, guys, I'm not sure, because I want them to doubt. Because when they doubt, they get much more excited to read the text and to find out if they were right or I was right. So this is exactly what I want. If I just show them the text, they get discouraged immediately. They go like, oh, but teacher, it's so long, right? We know these sounds, right? I mean, sometimes they are enthusiastic, but sometimes they go like, okay, I'll do it. All right. Here, I want them to be excited. I want them to jump on the text, go like, okay, guys, so now I have 3 minutes. Let's quickly find the answers for the questions. 3, 2, 1, go. Timer, if you want to. All right, so they already get excited to read the text in detail because they want to make sure that they got the correct answers. Now, another task here, because this is a reading lesson, but there's also the vocab here. There is this task in which you have words, you have 9 words and you have 6 definitions. So you're only going to use 6 out of 9 words and you have to find 1 word for each definition. So which one means an illness? It's going to be a disease, right? You can see it's already matching. So it's kind of a game, but I turn it into something more challenging. I say, okay, you can do it. If you make a mistake, you have to leave it. You cannot correct it, right? Or sometimes I let them correct. Again, it's up to you. Depends on how well your students have already mastered the topic. And then I show them the text. But because it's digital and because I have these tools like markers, I cover the words. I go, there you go. You've read the text already. You have these words. Let's try to put them here. And what I love about this activity is that the result of the gap fill activity depends on the prior performance. If my students manage to put the definitions with their words correctly, they should have no problem doing this exercise. But if they made a mistake, they will not be able to do this exercise. And that's how they get immediate feedback. They have to go back, find other definitions, and then try to fill the gaps again. And I love it because, and this is my favorite, I left it for the end because this is my favorite sentence ever. In best designed games, the reward for solving a problem is a harder problem. And here we get back to this, you know, these immediate rewards. And immediate rewards, it doesn't have to be a sticker. It doesn't have to be, a toy, or it doesn't have to be a point. It can be a more difficult task, a harder problem to solve. You can say, oh my God, like, you've done this. Great. So now I have something really awesome for you, because now you can do it. Good job. You see, this is also this immediate reward. And this is this positive, this good type of an immediate reward, I believe. So remember, solve a problem, and as your reward, you get a more complex problem. So you're a pro now, right? You go to level 2. So goes in line with theory. So again, the last for today, digital high five, and let me very quickly just sum it up. So we talked about gamification, and we said that, first of all, it gives students very clear tasks, actionable, short. This is what we do, right? Rather than long-term, very vague potential benefits. We go step by step. There are long-term benefits, but my students can focus on here and now. So because of that, there is a lot of long-term motivation, especially if you use the tools, the digital tools, like in Gamified, Navio. I just love it. And my students stay excited during the lessons, but also motivated, because they know that when they solve something easy, they're going to get something harder, and it's going to continue for the whole year, hopefully for their, whole education process journey. There's a lot of fun because these are games, and I'm really not a nerd, and still, as a kid, I would play spelling game all the time. There you go. Because it's fun, right? Because the words drop and I have to click, and there are buttons, and it's just awesome. You can implement a lot of aspects of competition, but you don't have to. So you can control this, the aspect of competition. If your students get too competitive, let them compete against you, or just let them play the games individually, right? If they respond positively to competition, then put them in groups, put them in pairs, let them compete against one another. And also remember the grammatical task, the table, where we had a lot of theory, subject, auxiliary verb, activity, object, and also time, words. This is a lot of theory, but it can be taught in a very attractive way, teaching grammar in an attractive way by turning grammar into a game. And finally, something that I haven't mentioned before, no student is left behind. Now remember, as I said, we work in mixed ability classes. I believe every class we teach is a mixed ability class. And some students might not be best at English, but they might be awesome at games. And this is the moment when they can shine. No one is left behind. And also, because you can easily adjust the level of difficulty, you make sure that everyone is equally engaged. So that's going to be it from me for this session. So thank you very much for participating, and I encourage you to take these ideas and to just use them on Monday or next week or before the end of the school year. So, you can try them out. You can see which works for you, which work for you, and then add them to your idea book and hopefully make your life much easier. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maggie. I don't know how about the rest, but from you, I get a huge burst of energy right now. And I need to cooperate with all the ideas you told me, so it will take time. Okay.
All right. I encourage you to do so.
Yeah. While we wait for the questions from the audience, just as a quick reminder, don't forget in the commentary section, there is a form to fill in to receive the documents. And also, I have one question for you, Maggie. So we got all the excitement in the class. It's the highest point. Students want to play. They go through all the activities. But we need to summarize it. We need to get the lower level. We need to get back to their attention. What your recommendations would be to go to just a little bit calmer,
So what I normally do in such cases, because that is true, like sometimes we like to boost this energy level, but sometimes it gets a little bit too high and we want our students to calm down a little bit because they need to stay focused. Like we need these quiet moments of the lesson. I would also use games for that. I would just choose games in which there is no competition. And I would use games that require of my students to stay focused, and I would give them difficult tasks that are gamified, in which they have to, usually I'd go with solve the mystery. So for example, the examples I gave with color coding, you can make a longer list of color coded sentences, give them the key and ask them to try to decode it. And this works very well because they have fun, because they reveal new sentences, but at the same time, they have to stay focused, they have to stay quiet because there's no running, there's no competition here. It's just them and their work. So normally I would, it's very important what you've just said. We do need these calm moments in the lesson. And also I think sometimes as a teacher, I used to panic when my lessons were more like, quiet, because I thought, oh, but it's quiet, so there's no fun, so this is not a good lesson, which is not true. Lessons can be fun and quiet at the same time. So then I encourage something based on like games, based on coding, or for example, revealing parts of the picture, or for example, games in which I show words and my students, they have to draw it, and then they swap pictures and they have to guess who had what words, which words, and so on. Games like that, in which they do not compete, in which they do not take part in dialogues, but they work individually. And I think it's quiet and fun at the same time. So I hope it answers the question. Especially after the pandemic, it might be difficult, right? Because they have learned online for so long, and getting back to a big classroom, which is louder also, this would require a lot of work from us. But I still encourage to use games, because then they are not bored, they're engaged, and they don't feel that, it's so difficult to be back in the classroom.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the answer. Colleague is asking for the question, is it possible to use Navio for free, or is it a trial version of it?
As far as I know, I think it's best to contact the Macmillan representative for that. As far as I know, if your school uses Navio with books, they would also get this program, as far as I know. But I think it's best to ask your representative, because I usually focus on the methodology of it, all right? But with these aspects, I wouldn't like to say something which is not true. So, but I believe you can ask your representative to just, try it out so you can see how it works. And I'm sure you can figure it out. And I do recommend, I love Navio, really. Like, I've been using it for quite some time. And when the pandemic hit, it was really just a lifesaver to me, because everything is ready, everything is online. And and my students, because they were already familiar with the program, it was easier for them to work in this very new environment, because we had used it in a classroom before, so it was kind of not that new to them. And as you know, managing energy in online lessons is doable, feasible, but quite a challenge, right?
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't see any more questions, and I hope that we need to work through everything right now, what we learned today. Also, this video can be found in this YouTube channel, so you can watch it later on. And I hope that weekend will be better and sunnier than we were having day to day. And I wish all the best for everyone.
Thank you very much. And also, if the weather gets bad, remember, there is no, most popular saying in Hamburg is that there is no bad weather, there are only bad clothes. So I hope we all have good clothes, and I hope you enjoy the weekend too. And thank you very much for having me. It was a big pleasure on my side. So thank you very much.